Welcome back to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning.
This is our Tuesday and Thursday EV podcast, and the image behind us is a rendering of an AI-generated studio. There we go. It just went away for a second. Are we okay? Okay. So, got a lot to cover today, and one of the first things that I was going to cover with you guys is Franz von Holzhausen is the Tesla lead designer that has been leading that design team for many years. It's actually his 15-year anniversary there. And if we can throw up a picture, guys, it's the Franz-1 picture. And it shows Franz when he was much younger, sitting there in Elon's office. And Franz has an interesting background, and if you think about it, a 15-year veteran at Tesla is pretty remarkable. There's some attrition there, and so he's, one of the ones that has stayed there a long time. And that picture, I think, is about to come. The background on Franz is he was born in 1968. He has been involved in design most of his life. He's the responsible, or his team, he led the design for the Tesla Model S. There's Elon and Franz 15 years ago, it looks like. The Model 3, the Model X, Model Y, the Semi, and the yet to be released Cybertruck, and the second generation Tesla Roadster. Prior to Tesla, Franz worked at Mazda, General Motors, and Volkswagen. And some of the history there is, in 1992, Franz started his career with Volkswagen, where he worked as a designer for the microbus and the New Beetle concept project known as Concept 1. In 2000, so 8 years later, he moved to General Motors as a design manager, where he worked on the Saturn Sky and the Pontiac Solstice. Now that Solstice looks a little bit like that new second-generation Roadster, so you can see some of his design elements being incorporated in that earlier car. In 2005, he then left GM and he took a role at Mazda, where he was chief designer. And there he led designs of the Mazda Kabura concept car, and that then debuted in 2006 at the North American International Auto Show, of the Mazda Furai concept car that was also unveiled at that point in Detroit. In 2008, Franz ended up at Tesla, and he's been known for designing, of course, a number of vehicles there, most of which we've listed so far. His personal life, he grew up in a household which was influenced by design. His father is an industrial designer. I've actually talked to his dad a few times. We link up on LinkedIn normally. And there's an interesting story about how Franz's dad decided that his son might benefit from an education at the Art Center College in Los Angeles, I believe. And that's where he eventually got his design degree. We have another picture, if we can pop that up. It's the clay. It's image number 1, guys. And what they talk about here is that designers still use clay models for a full-size 3D rendering. And one would think that in today's day and age with CAD and now artificial intelligence, it turns out that neither of those quite do the trick. They can go from CAD to clay with an automated rig, but the tweaks and polishing out the curves until they're pleasing to the eye, still somewhat of a manual method, apparently.
That's fascinating, too, considering how good AI is getting and how good a CAD has been for many, many years. You're going from the older CAD versions of basic 3D wireframe modeling, which then you could say, okay, I'd really want to see what this looks like, to the more modern word. Man, it looks pristine, it looks perfect on the screen, but it's just not quite the same.
Yeah. And I think the original Tesla Roadster clay model is at the Peterson Museum right now. Hey, Richard, you guys were there. Did you see a clay model?
I don't think it was the clay model. It was one of those. It was a wind tunnel model. I didn't touch it. I didn't really want to get kicked out of there, but some sort of model of that kind.
Okay, all right. And we have a scaled down version of the new Tesla Roadster here that actually has Franz's signature on it, which the guys collected at the Peterson Museum.
One of the things I've liked from the secondhand interactions that I've seen on Franz and the news stories that we talk about, he seems to be a man of the people. Whether it's us getting his signature because he was out hobnobbing with the crowd at the Peterson Auto Museum, or telling people, hey, let's meet up in Carlsbad and drive up to the Auto Museum. That happened earlier this year. And then he gave people the treat of opening up a Cybertruck and letting people go in and sit there and take photos and stuff like that. He's been a really good ambassador for for Tesla and for the Tesla brand.
Yeah. The guys at Tesla, by the way, legend has it that they call him Frank Woodhouse because his last name in German is von Holzhausen. That means from the wood house or the wood shed.
Okay.
All right.
On YouTube, we have George here from the Watch Rich Rebuilds channel. He says, hey, guys, and wave to us.
Good morning, George.
Good morning. Instagram, Payrun Pandora System says hello as well.
And then Instagram, shiv.am5447. Hello, sir. Welcome. YouTube, Roger Starkey. He says, Franz seems to be one of those infuriating people who looks better with age. Good point.
Pete, you are ageless.
Well, thank you.
We've seen pictures here in the company, past employee events 25, 30 years ago. You're just ageless.
Thank you.
Instagram, Payrun Pandora System again says, hello, I am from Ukraine. Would really like to learn this craft from you.
The craft of working on electric vehicles, yes. And by the way, welcome from Ukraine. There's much going on there, and we all feel for you. The simple answer that we have for people that want us to either franchise, train, that want to do internships here to learn how to repair, we are very busy and just simply have not been able to put any kind of franchise program into place or training programs, although it's on the drawing board somewhere. At this point in time, the highest priority is getting customer cars repaired and getting them back to customers. And, the Tesla Roadsters keep us very busy. We are certainly capable of working on the other platforms. We do a fair share of X's and Model S's that are out of warranty, but it's really Roadster that keeps us most busy, and it's what we're most successful with, actually.
By all means, and the number of videos and things that we'll put out on Facebook or on social media, a lot of times, and the newsletters that we put out, that's one of the ways that you can get information about how to do a lot of these repairs, and is probably the best way that we have to help provide training. It's in the context of what we're doing already to help the Roadster community and Roadster owners and Tesla owners overall.
What some companies that are in the independent space have been able to successfully do, like Rich Rebuilds, for example, was to find people in the industry that worked for one of these EV manufacturers or service organizations. And if they're looking for work, they've been able to hire them. And there's a wealth of knowledge that comes with that kind of on-the-job training that takes place, and oftentimes with the manufacturers, formal training. Go back to Fremont, and they get more of an education on working on their brand or on EVs in general. It will improve as time goes on because this is a rapidly growing, disruptive technology that is taking over transportation, and eventually the service delivery options and capabilities will improve and grow along with it. Roger Starkey from YouTube talking about Franz looking young. He says, much like Pete, smiley face. Thank you.
Nulper53 on YouTube is with us again this morning. Good morning. He says, the cracked window on the debut Cybertruck is the signature from Franz that I want.
Those of you that watched it, the look on their faces was priceless. You initially might have, for a split second, thought, maybe this is contrived, this is staged, right? Because it is quite a media event It wasn't. You could tell, just on the look on Franz's face, and then of course the cuss word that spewed from Elon right on stage there on nationwide television. But as it turned out, there was a very positive, or there was a silver lining to that episode, in that it did create one of the biggest marketing events of the century.
Yeah, it's kind of the adage of there is no such thing as bad publicity.
Publicity,
Publicity.
Mm-hmm.
PT Barnum for us.
Mm-hmm. YouTube, Watch Rich Rebuild's channel says, Pete looked great on the beach. You guys get a picture of me on a beach while I was gone or something?
Yeah. Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah, George was kind enough to shadow you and give us a picture that was somewhat resembling.
Oh, okay. All right. So it was a facsimile.
It was, yeah. We'll leave it at that, right, guys?
That's right, Pete. You can go back and rewatch the last couple episodes.
Well, I'm going to have to now. Yeah. If George saw it, I got to see that too.
Oh, yes. TikTok Bash A is giving us some waves and good morning. We encourage you guys, when you have the questions come in and the comments come in, tell us where you're coming from as well. We really like to hear see where you're coming in from, and helps people to see the kind of global audience that we have.
So we've got some items here in the news, and the thing that stood out for me is there's some car manufacturers that are really struggling with how to transition and pivot into EVs, and the ones at the top of my list are Lamborghini, GM with a hybrid Corvette, Subaru most recently, and then we've got Toyota, of course, the people that could have owned the EV market after the wildly successful transition from ICE transportation into hybrids with that Toyota Prius. Both of them are in the news. Do you want to tell us about Subaru a bit?
Yeah, Subaru is announced recently with Panasonic that they've started talks to build a medium to long-term partnership that's going to help to meet demand for their battery electric vehicles. They've also announced that they want to produce a battery electric vehicle around the time of the late 2020s. My take on this is that Subaru they're just another late to the game Japanese automaker. What has happened to the Japanese automakers? You go back 30 or 40 years, and they were the pinnacle of innovation and build quality and everything that we aspired to be in the automotive industry. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, they're getting left in the dust. Subaru is announcing their first foray into electric vehicles after there are now some 50 or 60 models out by at least a dozen different manufacturers, both legacy manufacturers and new manufacturers. And these are on the street, being sold today type of vehicles. Toyota is no better. They've still announced that they're working on improving things, and battery electric is going to be our future. But when are we going to hear about a Corolla or a Camry that converted to a battery electric vehicle that's not done by some sort of a third party?
Yeah, but you're right about the Japanese losing some of their reputation and their position in the market. For those of you that were around in the last century, the middle of the last century, there was product that was made in Japan. And for quite some time, it was considered inferior. It's mm-hmm. very much the same as the current stigma, which is also unfair, made in China. China is an economic powerhouse that is quickly going to learn to dominate a number of markets. But for the meantime, when you see something made in China, you consider it inferior, second rate, all of that. Believe it or not, the same thing was true in the 60s in the last century with stuff that was made in Japan. Mm-hmm. And then Japan got their act together in a big way. And you had brands like Sony, Nakamichi, Kenwood that just began to dominate the stereo and the audio industry. Then came cameras. Remember Canon and Nikon.
Oh, yes.
And of course, they became unstoppable in certain markets, high quality product being pumped out. With cars, they're struggling right now with EVs. You know, again, Toyota. In fact, let's bring up a picture here, guys. It's the Toyota battery, and they're pretty proud of the fact that they have created a battery that will give an electric car 900 miles of range. All right. First of all, has the EV market been asking for this? That's my first question. And as someone pointed out, once that picture comes up, there it is. The question here was, if you put that much battery in a Tesla, it would have a range of about 2,000 miles. And it doesn't look like there's any room left for passengers.
Yeah.
Well, that was the first takeaway there. You know, I'm sure it's a great technology, but Toyota, are you listening? What does the market expect from you, and what does it want from you? And I don't think it's this behemoth battery type vehicle that is going to go 900 miles.
You know, I took some time to read through articles and comments because I realized the 900-mile battery has been out in the press for a little while. And some of the comments I found from other people were very interesting as well. In addition to the one about the Tesla with 2,000 miles, an electric Corolla, someone has said, with a 10-minute recharge time, would be on the same level as a Model T or a VW Bug in terms of changing the auto industry. And I think that was an on-point comment. There's a chance that we're still waiting 50-some models later to find that one electric vehicle that will be the tipping point that will allow for mass adoption. We haven't reached it yet, even with some of the really excellent cars that are out there. Model 3 is probably the closest one that we're getting to mass adoption between the price and quality and mileage. Another comment. The only way we had a rail system, a postal service, an interstate system, and safe air travel here in the United States was that the government had to subsidize their construction and launch. It will be the same for EVs. We have a lot of government interaction right now with the electric vehicle, between the $7,500 federal tax credit for people who buy them, to the charging the $500 billion worth of the Inflation Reduction Act that's been set aside for EV charging stations and other green initiatives like that, to grants like we're going to talk about later. PepsiCo and individual companies have received millions of dollars in grants in order to electrify their fleets. So that, I think, is also an on-point type of thing. It's happening. It's kind of being pushed along by our government, which is causing a lot of stress and angst, and gnashing of teeth is almost the word I like to take. There is a timeline on this announcement that Toyota had as well that I found in one article and it had missed everywhere else. This 900-mile battery is not available today. It won't be available next year. In fact, Toyota's announcement is that they're developing an LFP battery pack first. That will be ready sometime in the 2026 to 2027 timeframe, and it will have about a 660-mile range. In 2027, they will introduce a solid-state battery pack, their intention is, with about a 720-mile range, and not until sometime in late 2028 will this 900-mile range battery be out there.
Interesting.
So we're still talking about 5 years away. Maybe they'll give some time to actually get the battery to a reasonable size.
Right. You know, in the 70s, we had the OPEC oil crisis, if you remember, and there were long gas lines, and it woke up the American public to the fact that we don't really own that natural resource and that we could be at risk. And the net result of that wake-up call was that people began to dump their big engine cars. Prior to that time, the longer you made a car, the bigger, the more horsepower, the bigger the engine, the better it sold, you know? And people began to dump those cars left and right. I mean, you could buy Hemi cars at less than a standard car because it had too big an engine, 426 cubic inch back then.
Right.
And the cars that dominated were Datsun and any of the small Japanese cars and the Euro cars that began to come in. So there were periods of time when Japan definitely had some dominance in various markets. One other story that I like to tell, I worked for a company that was at one point the #2 computer company in the world, Digital Equipment Corporation.
Mhm.
They were IBM #2. And they couldn't become #1 easily because IBM had been around decades before they came into being. But it was back in the days of large computers, mainframes. We didn't have distributed processing yet to the extent that we do now. And anyway, Digital developed a plant here in Phoenix that I worked for to build line printers and floor standing terminals. These are floor standing line printers and terminals, the LA36 and the LA180. And this was a dot matrix type printer where you had 7 pins that would fire alternately to create characters on a page as the head or the dot matrix assembly was going across the paper. Old typewriter technology. It had there was a ribbon, that actually gave you the darkness on the page. And anyway, the interesting thing about this was it was during a point in time in the 70s when Japan began to introduce desktop printers. Okidata was a big name back
Oh,
then.
yes.
Panasonic had printers. So here Digital was with a floor standing, metal standing type dot matrix printer. Building them, by the thousands every month over here at the Phoenix, North Phoenix plant, while Japan was beginning to flood the market with desktop printers, things that looked like the size of like an IBM Selectric.
Right.
And less expensive, and of course, far more popular. Why would you take up floor space if you can pop something onto a tabletop or a desk or, even your desk and have a printer there? Well, Digital wasn't paying attention. I know this because I worked there. And they began to get a backlog of product to the point where they needed more storage. And you know what they did? Rather than shift gears and build desktop printers to meet the market demand, they built a 500,000 square foot building to store all the printers that they were building that were surplus. Maybe optimism prevailed and they thought, well, maybe the market's going to recover, it's going to come back, we'll stimulate our distribution channel to sell more. Whatever it was, they began to fill this large building with excess inventory. And it's still there, by the way. It's now a co-location. It's over here on 2500 West Union Hills Road.
Yeah.
Right? Again, myopic thinking, not paying attention to the market. And again, Japan, they captured that market. What they're doing now with EVs is the same kind of a replay of a declining capability within their country. So.
Yeah, it's declining. It's the reverse of what had happened before. They're afraid to innovate. They're stuck in their ways, as it were. I can still remember working through college. Downstairs in the hotel where I worked, I was up in the sales office in the evenings, was their filing clerk, and our front desk had a digital equipment VAX system, and sitting on top of the old printer, which was mostly non-functional for the hotel, was an Okidata printer. They used the digital printer as a printer stand for their Okidata. Because the Okidata was faster and worked better, and it had 24 pins instead of 7.
Yeah, as sad as that is. And then, in the meantime, you look at these other countries. Look at China, what they're doing with EVs.
Yeah.
They're rapidly gaining market share. What was it? We presented some of those statistics just within the last few podcasts.
Well, China is, they're the #2 EV maker in the world. They're oh my goodness, the name is slipping me right now. The Chinese company that's going to be Tesla's biggest rival.
BYD.
Thank you. Yeah, BYD is going to be Tesla's biggest rival, according to Tesla. And most of us here in the States have never heard of BYD because we've never seen a BYD car except in pictures. Yet they're putting out beautiful, technologically advanced, and high quality vehicles today.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be a force to be reckoned with for decades to come.
Yeah. So I'm staying with the Subaru for just a moment. There's some additional information. Subaru currently offers one all-electric model, and that's a Solterra electric SUV. It is, however, built on a Toyota platform, which has similarities with Toyota's BZ4X. But then they go on and they say that Subaru plans to expand its electric vehicle lineup, commencing with production of its own electric cars in 2025. A long ways away, guys.
Yeah.
Look what's going to happen in the meantime here. It'll be produced, they say, alongside its internal combustion engine vehicles in a mixed assembly line. I'm not sure that's possible, but they think it is. And then by 2027, they aim to inaugurate a dedicated factory solely for the production of pure electric cars.
I can only hope that they're right in their thinking, which is obviously if we're one of the last ones to come to the game, we can learn from everybody else's mistakes.
Yeah, that could be a troubling philosophy.
So, YouTube, Soren Yamaker Moller is joining us from Denmark, and I hope I got that somewhat correct.
Welcome.
Welcome.
We haven't seen Niles yet this morning. He's from Denmark, too. He's with the Danish Genome Institute. YouTube, Roger Starkey says he's from London, the real London. Okay, thank you.
And then on Instagram, unfortunately, so far I can only with an interpreter. I'm not sure who that one's from, though.
Okay.
My apologies. That one is from our friend from Ukraine, Perun Pandora System.
Oh, okay. And then George from Watch Retree Builds channel. He says, talking about other brands, I saw 2 Polestars broken down and getting towed on my trip in Florida. One was at a public charger, so it was a low battery tow.
That's always embarrassing when that happens, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yes. You know, George, he was commenting or communicating with us separately. He's back from his vacation, had missed a couple of episodes. You gotta watch the TikTok video that Gruber Motors has put out that went viral and has probably close to 3 million views right now, of a guy laying down in a parking spot with drivers coming up and yelling at him that he's taking their spot. The whole reason is that his Model 3 decided to die about 20 feet away from the parking spot.
Yeah, and he was trying to make sure that he had a parking or a charging spot. So he laid diagonally across it to block any people coming in.
Mm-hmm.
What we didn't present in the video, and we have it, we probably should rebroadcast that, was a guy in a Tesla that drove up to him and began yelling at him for laying there and blocking his access to the charging, even though he explained why he was doing that he needed to get some help to push the car over to the charging station.
Yeah, and rather than get help, he wanted to take the charging station away.
Yep.
Ugh. So, can you guys scroll down just a little bit on the questions? I think we have other down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Roger Starkey on YouTube. Japanese automakers are suffering from corporate ego.
Yeah,
I agree.
Good point.
And then next, Niles has joined us from the Bion Danish Genome Institute. He says, good morning. It doesn't look good for GM and Ford. Maybe they should get together with Aptera about making a 4-person car. Then current batteries would have a long range, would boost Aptera too. So I actually agree with that. Ford and General Motors have really struggled. Ford talked, we were talking in our last podcast, I think, Pete. Ford has about $2.5 billion in profit, bottom line, through the first half of the year, but for their ICE vehicles, and about $1.1 billion in losses for their electric vehicles. And I had heard that made the news over the weekend. They've dropped their Ford Lightning prices by as much as $10,000, and I'm thinking, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time.
I wonder if that was precipitated by Cybertrucks beginning to get released now.
I'm wondering as well.
Yeah, because if profitability isn't there, you would think that they would have kept their their high margin pricing intact. And, the other thing that's really revealing about that whole Ford situation and that Ford F-150 Lightning, um, their dealers, which are supposed to be supporting the manufacturer, are selling them for $20,000 over MSRP
Right.
because they can.
Yeah, because they can. It's a money grab. And even Ford itself, if you remember when they first announced the Lightning, they said the base trim would be $39,995. And within a year, that itself had gone up to $59,995.
Yeah.
So while ostensibly they said it's because of material costs, I'm not buying it. I think it's more because it was corporate greed than anything else.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got the PepsiCo, the semi truck. You want to handle that one, Mark?
Yeah, Pepsi has made the press again recently. Pepsi has a Pepsi green initiative, basically. They did get a grant of about $31 million from the government to help electrify their fleet. Pepsi's green initiative includes actually a wide range of vehicles, anything from electric forklifts to delivery vans to 21 Tesla semis.
Okay.
And more recently, they've been talking about the Tesla semi fleet, and they had unveiled their fleet in the Sacramento facility. They've stated that the Tesla semi fleet was made possible through a grant by Sacramento's Air Quality District. And then in February, they expanded its Tesla semi megacharger. They had originally submitted to install 8 megacharger stalls at their facility in Fresno, but now since they have actually 21 Tesla semis now, they expanded those set of stalls. Some of the things that they noticed on the Tesla semi is that first, its range is coming in at pretty close to advertised. The advertised range on the Tesla semi is around 500 miles. These semis that they have, they typically drive them hard. They're typically driving 12 hours a day. 3 of the 21 semis are specifically geared for long haul, or they're specifically designated for long haul, which means they're taking trips of up to 450 miles. The other thing, and they're successful in these trips, obviously. The other thing is charging times. It's not unusual for a truck driver who has a diesel truck to have to spend between 20 and 30 minutes filling his fuel tank with diesel when he goes into the gas station. That's just how much diesel the tanks hold. Tesla drivers are talking about being able to go from a 10% charge to a 90% charge in about 20 minutes.
Interesting.
Now what they're doing is the mega charger, they're supposed to be capable of up to a megawatt. Right now they're configured at 750 kilowatts. So these chargers are effectively charging these large battery packs 75 or 80% in as little as 20 to 30 minutes, although the official Pepsi lines in their video that they present talk about charging within 45 minutes. They also talk about how they don't typically take the trucks out overnight. They'll park them all in the chargers, let them charge overnight. The next morning, they're all up at 100%, and they're taking them off, and then they don't come back until that evening. So Pepsi says that they say, we've got some pretty aggressive goals to decarbonize our business. By 2040, we aim to have about 40% of our fleet decarbonized. And this is Todd Squarick, Pepsi's chief sustainability officer, that says this. So the PepsiCo Positive, or PEP Plus program, is the company's end-to-end transportation plan. That's what I was trying to think of just a minute ago. And it focuses on sustainability, not only from a electric vehicle standpoint, but even with their human capital and their company growth. So it's kind of a cool thing to see. I actually was able to watch a little video of a Pepsi truck taking off from a stoplight. two things that were notable. First, it's just sounded like an electric car. That the end, you don't have the loud engine or anything else like that. Just that electric motor whirl, as it were. The second thing was that truck, which was loaded, was taken off just about as fast as the car next to it that was
Right.
taping it.
If you remember about 6 months ago or so, it was during Super Bowl. We're driving down our street here, and the guys ran into a semi truck coming up the street that was totally silent, and suddenly realized this was a Frito-Lay
Mm-hmm.
Tesla semi truck. So we did some really quick, cool shots doing a comparison of a Tesla Roadster next to the later generation semi Tesla. And yeah, that one generated quite a bit of interest on social media, just the size difference, you know?
Oh, I did not know until reading some of these articles about the PepsiCo trucks that both Tesla and Nikola, who is also making a Class 8 semi and is delivering their vehicles regularly now, modeled a lot of their vehicle features on the European Class 8 commercial vehicle model instead of the US based
Really?
truck model. I didn't know that. There are some differences in the in just the size and geometry of the vehicles between the U.S. and Europe. So these are more of a European style in terms of the look and the geometry of the vehicles.
Interesting. A lot of aerodynamics on these semis as well. You know, your traditional Peterbilt looks like a giant brick going down the road with that large flat nose cone, you know, the
Oh, yeah.
grill. And but yeah, that's it definitely makes a difference when they introduce some aerodynamics into a large vehicle like that, especially with the distances they travel.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
So we've got a news item here, the Tesla Model S Plaid. There's a track package available that will unlock the vehicle to 200 mile per hour top speed. And reports are that it's actually a bit higher than that as well. But so the types of things that Tesla changed, we've got an image here, Jesse. It's called a Track Pack -1, if we could throw that up. And again, remember the Tesla Model S Plaid even, it's a 4-door sedan. You can take the family with you and do a blistering 0 to 60 in 2 seconds or so, you know, with the family in the back and the pets. So what they improved with this track package, by the way, the cost of this is about $15,000 to $20,000, and they do a comparison with a aftermarket version that you can also do by getting, for example, the Unplugged Performance brake package, which is almost $9,000, and different wheels, different ceramic rotors, of course. But the Tesla advantage, they say, rather than going aftermarket on this, is that it's inclusive. Everything is included, including labor. And you can purchase this kit through your Tesla app and then schedule to take it into your service centers to do this Model S Plaid update. So what it does for you is it's going to, Tesla will reprogram it to unlock the limitations that it currently has so that you're now capable of sending this 4,700-pound missile up to 200 miles per hour. Now, in order to do that, of course, you're going to need a much better set of brakes. And at this point, maybe we can digress. There's a local Model S Plaid customer here that is definitely into experimentation, Uncle Chet. And what's the name of his channel, guys?
Chillin' with Chet.
Chillin' with Chet. Okay, there we go. He's the one that decided that he wanted to replicate Elon's passion with the James Bond movie, where a car is actually turned into a submarine briefly. So he had us waterproof his Tesla Model S Plaid. He went to a local track here in South Phoenix. He had some earth-moving equipment brought in, and he had a large trough made that was lined with a vinyl to hold water. And his goal was to actually prove that you can drive a Tesla Model S Plaid underwater. It was last summer. I remember it was brutally hot because we were out there waiting in the direct sun, no shade, of course. for this event to occur. And as it turned out, we really didn't have any engineering talent involved in the ratio of ballast versus car weight and what would actually make this thing go underwater. And it turns out that despite putting a couple thousand pounds of weights from Target, actually, the weightlifting kits, the car basically floated partially, and we didn't quite achieve that submarine effort that was intended. So it was done again, and I think the second attempt, we weren't there for the second attempt, was a bit more successful, but still not perfect.
Yeah, I remember talking to the guys after the first attempt and seeing the video of the wheels are spinning and it's kind of slowly floating down.
Yeah.
And we did a quick calculation, just look it up on Google, what's the, weight of air displacement and so on. And I think he said he was going to add another 4,000 or 5,000 pounds. And I remember telling Jesse, that's still not going to work. Based on the rough air volume that you have in the vehicle, you're talking about needing, some 12,000 pounds of weights to displace the amount of air.
To overcome the buoyancy issues.
Yeah, to overcome all the buoyancy issues. Although to his credit, the second time around, they not only flattened the tires, but they filled the tires. And I don't remember if they had filled the tires with water or with some other heavyweight material.
Right.
But there was because a lot of the buoyancy was coming from the tires themselves.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, you've got pressurized there. And there was even a first responder that was there with the full vehicle in case, this thing didn't come out of that water trough and they had to dive under in order to retrieve Uncle Chet from this vehicle. But, Chet, he's definitely he's a showman. He's courageous as can be to attempt things like this. But the reason I'm telling you this whole story about the submarine type effort is because months later, when he finally got his Tesla Model S Plaid dried out sufficiently where it would drive, he started to track the car. And it was the same kind of a thing. There were some good intentions, but it turns out that despite a brake upgrade that he had selected at the time, recognizing that it's going to be difficult to run this car on the track with brake fatigue and overheating and all that, he ended up plowing into a curve or some of the barriers on a curve because his brakes gave out despite having upgraded them. So apparently Tesla has a better solution here, and for about $15,000 to $20,000, you can unleash your Tesla Model S Plaid, get it up to 200 miles per hour, maybe even plus, and they claim that it's going to stop as intended. Because stopping a car at 200 miles an hour is a bit more difficult than at 100 or even 50.
The math that goes behind momentum is staggering when you begin to understand it. I remember getting a lesson on momentum with automobiles, with an automobile, standard brakes, trying to stop for a tree that had fallen in the road. And if you were at 70 miles an hour, you would stop right at the tree from when you first saw it. At 100 miles an hour, you would slow down to 70 miles an hour.
Okay.
By the time you got to the tree, so you would hit the tree at 70 miles an hour. So I can't even imagine 200 miles an hour. I think the missile moniker that the article has given is absolutely accurate. You're not really driving; you're just kind of pointing at that point.
Yeah. I have a friend in town here who took his Bugatti Veyron to a track in Europe. It was a 5-mile track, and actually got up over 250 miles per hour and joined the 250-mile club. Got a special jacket with a moniker. And same thing, they had to unleash the car, the software in the car to allow that.
Yeah.
And I think 254 was his top speed on that car. But again, yeah, you have to think, how's that thing going to stop? The Veyron or the Bugatti brakes, of course, are way over the top.
Yeah.
Perfectly engineered for that kind of performance.
And the car is going to be much, much lighter than a Model S Plaid.
All right, YouTube. George is chiming in. He says most Americans on average drive less than 50 miles a day. That means that the 900-mile battery would last over 2 weeks before a charge. We're getting back to that 900-mile battery that Toyota is coming out with.
Yeah, we've got quite a few comments that apply to that, and then some that apply to the former stories. So
All right.
we'll want to catch up.
YouTube, Heinrich Liesner. He says, "Hi there, gents. The news article from Toyota is a recycled and updated article from 2012 in regards to the solid-state battery technology." Well, thank you for pointing that out. I did not realize that.
I didn't realize that. I saw that a lot of magazines, a lot of online news portals brought out this story in June of 2023. So I had thought it was a new and newsworthy article as well.
So what we're saying is that these news-type organizations sometimes regurgitate. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Instagram, Collins_coffee_dadsy. He says, "I like the show." Well, thank you for joining us. And YouTube, Ray Johnson is joining us. Thank you, Ray. He says, "I just got a vent. 212 Model S P85. Love the vent feature at the app or on the app. Is there any way to use the app center screen action to close all 4 windows when you get back into the car?" Continued.
Or his continuation is, "Or must we close the window with the window switches?" Ray, we've been looking for this because he had come to us with a question on this a little while ago, and I have not been able to find it yet. The biggest reason for me personally is the Tesla Model S that I drive happens to have a salvage title. And when I try to connect the app to it, for some reason, Tesla doesn't recognize that the car exists, so I can't connect the app.
There's a very specific reason for that, like no support for salvage vehicles. But, I remember when we did Uncle Chet's car in preparation for the submarine type event. We spent a lot of time trying to make the car waterproof. We ended up taking the wheels off. We found little vents underneath in the tire compartments, for example.
Mm-hmm.
They were one-way valves to allow air to escape from the cabin, but not from the outside in. But despite that, we ended up closing some of those. We also ended up spending a lot of time with Vaseline petroleum jelly, just simply waterproofing connectors, wiring harnesses,
Sure.
But yeah, it was quite an experiment. I think we've got a video on that whole project that people could see on YouTube. Do you guys remember if there's a video out there on that? No, not off the top of our heads. All right.
That was before my time.
If we didn't, we should have. Let's put it that way.
I believe we have something either on TikTok or on our Facebook shorts, our Facebook videos.
There is one. I've got a mental image now of a submarine type Model S in water. And yeah, it's out there on YouTube. For those of you that want to see it, you'll see some of the preparations we went through to try to waterproof that car. Instagram, AZ_EV_King. He said, "What is the ETA for the barn find roadsters?" Okay, I'm glad someone asked. The cars are on a ship right now. They will be hitting the Long Beach Pier August 26th. And from there, Mark is working on customs paperwork to make sure that this is only a few days once they arrive.
Correct. That's correct. We're working with the owner of the vehicles and with their customs broker to make sure we have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed and red tape all taken care of. And so that way they can be ready to go. Hopefully we'll only be a couple of days in customs, and then we'll be on their way here.
Mm-hmm. The sea containers that they're coming in, they were transferred into smaller sea containers, which is a good thing, actually. We don't have 40-footers that we have to try to juggle. They're in 20-foot sea containers. There are 3 of them. And we have an area that we're going to stage them in front of the Gruber Motor Company building. Mm-hmm. We've invited some social media people like Supercar Blondie, for example. Be wonderful if they show up, and we'll have a second event here as we unveil these barn find roadsters. And this time around, we're going to be able to extract some data from the cars. The first things we're going to do, of course, is clean them up. We'll do an inventory, and then we're going to tap into the vehicle management system. We're going to reactivate the 12-volt systems. We're going to take log files, and we're going to uncover what the circumstances were at the time these roadsters died or got bricked. We're going to be able to establish timelines. We're going to be able to see actual odometer readings. What is unknown at this point is when Tesla was creating cars back in the day, how much test driving and how much, if any, miles were put on the odometers back then.
Yeah, I think another question that we are anxious to answer is were the service plugs pulled on these cars before they were put on the sea containers, knowing that the cars had batteries that would not likely last for the entire duration of the trip? So we're hopeful that that will be the case, in which case we might have some very small log files.
Yeah. It'll be an interesting, no one is really thinking that the batteries were going to be able to remain dormant without any drain whatsoever for 13 years. But this will be the first time we'll be able to find out. I did talk to Tesla Corporate and some of the engineers involved in the battery project, and they said that for the ESS packs, as they call them, energy storage systems in the Roadster, they would routinely top charge them just like we do over in our Gruber Power Services building for the UPS batteries. So they were on a routine charging or trickle charging process. So we'll find out whether without any of that, if there's any life left in these batteries in these cars.
Pete, do you think that those cells are going to have any kind of corrosion on them, like a remote control would if you left AA batteries in there for too long?
The lithium-ion batteries don't suffer from that problem, except in a few production failed type cells. And I think in all of the years we've been repairing Tesla Roadster batteries, we've seen maybe 3 to 5 that actually had any kind of leakage. We're not anticipating that. And remember, the Tesla Roadster batteries, many of the legacy batteries from 2008 are still going strong, are still in the cars, are still functional. No one yet knows what the end-of-life symptoms are going to be in a multi-cell 18650 lithium-ion battery pack.
It will be very interesting to see. Ray Johnson has another follow-up question for us about the vents. It says, do the Roadsters have this vent feature?
They do not, Ray. The Roadsters were basically a convertible to begin with, and although there's a hard top that you can attach, it's not always perfectly waterproof, and then there's a soft top that you can attach. But as far as any kind of frills like that, the Roadster is pretty much a prototype vehicle, and no consideration really given to how are we going to vent cabin type air, if we bring fresh air in. There were so many gaps and so many places for the air to escape.
Sure, and that might have been how they decided to try to vent it to start with.
Yeah.
Richard Flench on YouTube says the BYD Seagull is priced at $11,400 right now. Just wait till that hits the USA. It has a 55 kilowatt motor and a 30 kilowatt battery.
Richard Flenke, by the way, welcome. He worked with Jack Ricard for many years at EVTV, and he also wrote a book most recently. For those of you interested, on EVs, and I believe it was being sold on Amazon. But thank you for chiming in, Richard.
And thank you, Pete, for announcing his name correctly.
Okay. YouTube, Roger Starkey says, Pepsi drives a semi 450 miles because that's the distance between two locations. I think they did point that out in the article. Sacramento, and I forget what the other one was.
Yes, and I believe it was down towards Southern California where the other end of their terminus is at.
Mm-hmm.
Roger Starkey does say also the Pepsi mega chargers are supplied by solar. Thank you for pointing that out. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
One of the keys of the Pepsi program is that they are a completely green charging program. So they have these battery chargers that are solar run. They feed into mega packs, and then the chargers pull from the Megapacks to charge the batteries in the truck.
Perfectly clean way to do it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, Richard Flenke again points out, he says, Pepsi repeat routes make it a huge market for full self-driving. Who needs a driver? Not a can of soda. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
Good point. Although, along the lines of AI, I know I've heard recently ChatGPT has gone from, the 98th percentile on math questions or 98% correct on certain math questions all the way down to 2% correct.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully AI learns eventually how to distinguish between information and misinformation.
Yeah.
And full self-driving doesn't fall into that same category where it begins to encounter problems based on misinformation that it's receiving.
Yeah. That would be a huge liability. YouTube, Banana Man says, if only Pepsi could produce a product that cared as much about human health as Tesla does for planet health. That's a low blow, but yeah, I suppose it's true.
For some of their soda products, yes. PepsiCo is a whole lot more than Pepsi soda, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Again, Roger Starkey on YouTube. For those that are saying megachargers use a lot of energy, they're each equivalent to about 3 or 4 version 3 or generation 3 chargers. So the 8 megachargers are equivalent to about 30 of the version 3 units. It's not a problem. That is a good point. Your version 3 charger is going to be about a 250 kilowatt charger, and these megachargers are running at 750 kilowatts.
Okay. And then George from YouTube says, how many plaids have you guys had in the shop, and what were the issues? Well, the submarine plaid, of course, was a project. The other types of issues we've had were either low-tech auto, for example, like tires, or if it was an aftermarket type product that the customer wanted installed on their car. I believe the plaids, for the most part, are still under warranties. They came out in, 4 years ago or so?
Yeah, the plaids started coming out. I do think 2019 was the first year that they came out. I might be mistaken. It might have been 2020.
Yeah, so we don't see much out of warranty, or warranty type cars, because they get free service. But when there are any modifications that need to be done, we see those. We don't see a lot of them, though. I would say probably 4 or 5 is what we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm.
George is pointing out, he says, don't worry, Banana Man. One day a company like Pepsi will sell fresh air in a can. LOL. You know what? We probably thought the same thing in the last century about selling water. How's that possible, right? Jesse here drinks a water called Liquid Death. It's from Austria. It's in the Alps. And it costs as much as a can of soda. And it's water,
Yeah. Oh, and it's great water, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah, it's worth it.
It's worth it.
It reminds me. I grew up in the northwestern United States, and one of the things that we like to do every summer is parents would take us camping. And one of the things that we as a family would do is when we were driving on these mountain roads in the middle of nowhere, and you would see a spring coming out of the ground and flowing down either over the road or usually with a culvert under the road, we would stop sometimes and get some of that ice cold spring water because it was completely clear, and it was some of the best water in the world. That's what the Liquid Death tastes a little bit like. I was very impressed. I've had it once.
So Jesse has converted yet another individual to Liquid Death.
I'm not going to say converted necessarily, because I'm more of a reverse osmosis type of guy.
Oh, like an Arrowhead plastic bottled water. Okay.
Gotta be careful with reverse osmosis. As far as I understand it, that removes a lot of the healthy benefits of the water.
Oh, the minute. Oh.
Yeah, it does.
He's drinking one right now, actually. You didn't see him on camera. How much are one of those cans?
Well, I buy these in 8-packs from Amazon, and it's $11.99 for an 8-pack. So,
that's not too bad.
It's not bad.
Okay, yeah.
That's not too
over
bad.
$1 a can, but yeah. All right.
I think Jesse's main goals so far, from what we've experienced, are to convert people to 2 things. 1, Liquid Death. 2, Fusion.
Fusion, yeah. And it's coming, because there's
Don't
some
forget
news
about-
on Fusion.
Don't forget about aliens. That's 3 now.
Oh, but that's Sunday morning. We don't do that. That's the AI podcast, right? TikTok. Johnny Doe says, where can I see a video on the race/crash? If you go to Uncle Chet, or just Google Uncle Chet, or go to YouTube. What did you guys say the name of the channel was? You just said that. Uncle Chet's channel.
Chilling with Chet.
Chilling with Chet. Yeah, you can see, and yeah, it's not a pretty sight, but I think the car's back on the road, and I'm sure the brakes have been improved since then.
You know, Pete, that video, it reminds me, the sounds that he made in that video reminded me a whole heck of a lot of my motorcycle crashes.
Really?
You know, there was a running joke between me and my friends that whenever you crash, there's only one sound that you can make, and it's just, you can't, there's no breath that can come out, and there's no words at first.
And then there's that distortion of time when a split second can become minutes in your head because you've just sped everything up tremendously. YouTube Lightning Rod. Hello from Thunder Bay. It's 29 centigrade and 34% humidity, sunny and warm. Well, we are envious.
We are so envious. That's about, for those of us here in the States, that's about 85 degrees or so.
Now, YouTube, Nolver53 points out, he says, BZ4X sounds like a lab classification for a new disease. You know, I always get a kick out of these foreigners that come up with names that make perfect sense in their language in their country, but they come over here and you're going, what? You know, it was kind of like Elon's son, X something something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even the one of the more famous gaffes from years ago, the Chevy Nova. We think it's a cool car here. It's a kind of a muscle car, and they tried to sell it in Mexico, and they couldn't sell it and they didn't understand until they found out that Nova means no go.
No go, okay.
In Spanish.
And then there, of course, was Pinto, which, gets into a whole different world in Latin America.
Yes, yes.
YouTube, Richard Flenke says, Spaceballs, quote, "May the Schwartz be with you." Thank you.
Thank you.
George says, is it a requirement to have a beard to get hired at Gruber Motors? Oh, yeah. Let's see how many bearded guys we have here. Jesse, you have a beard? I can't remember.
I mean, slightly,
Yeah,
but they can only see you guys today, and there's no beards going on there.
No beard here, and Victor doesn't have a beard, and obviously Miranda doesn't have a beard.
Right. But you know what I was amazed at? Richard, he decided to have long hair because he's always wanted to have long hair. But the rate at which he grew his hair long is just over the top. It's like on steroids. I still don't understand how you got shoulder-length hair within like 6 months or something like that.
You know, Pete, that's been a problem or a blessing since I was a kid.
Really?
I would go just a few months without cutting my hair, and it would be just way long. But it's the same thing for the hair on my face too. I end up having to shave up by close to my eye.
Really?
At least twice a week.
Yeah.
Because it just grows.
But there's a cool thing about beards. I like those Civil War beards, those really long ones. And then you get a guitar in front of that, and you got a ZZ Top type jam session, and pretty cool stuff. And sunglasses, of course, too. That's one of the reasons we wear those. All right. So getting into some other news items, it looks like we've got a break in the questions. I wanted to run something by you guys. In October of 1975, there was a boxing match that went down in history. It was called the Thrilla in Manila. And it was a boxing match between Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali. And it was a brutal match. It went 14 rounds, and no clear-cut victory. I think there was one, and I should probably know who that was. Do you remember? Was it Ali that won that one?
I believe it was Ali that won that. And the reason it was in Manila in the Philippines is that Muhammad Ali had been banned from fighting in the United States.
It had something to do with Vietnam War protests, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. And but anyway, more than 500,000 people, 500,000 people paid to watch the Thrilla in Manila. And I remember it was a huge media event. There were months of promotion and sensationalism, and it made the headlines and all of that. And what they witnessed was one of the greatest fights in boxing history. Well, we've been dancing around this Zuckerberg and Musk cage fighting thing for some time now. And I initially thought, this is just a publicity stunt. These guys, they're not physically fit. They're going to hurt each other. Somebody's going to, sue each other at the end, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it made for great headlines. But this thing seems to be gaining momentum. It's gaining traction. There's yet another round of this now where I thought it had gone away last week, and suddenly it's back in the news. And both of them are saying, this is real. We're going to do this with some caveats. And one of the caveats is apparently Elon has had some neck injury from a sumo. Can we bring up a picture here, Jesse? Bring up sumo wrestler. And I did a bit of research on this, not real deep, but some. And it turns out that Elon, at some point in the past, had done something like this before and decided that battling a sumo wrestler would be fun, in his best interest or whatever, and he got hurt. And it crushed one of his discs in his neck between C5 and C6, which, by the way, I have some experience with. I had a pinched nerve in 5 and 6, and about 3-4 years ago, I spent almost a year being completely miserable because the pain from something like that is unbearable. The body can't, or the brain can't, distinguish between real trauma and a pinched nerve, and it thinks that that the skin's being ripped off your arm, for example, or you've plunged into hot water But anyway, so I feel for Elon on this issue because that can be very painful. And then I noticed for a while that at one point Elon began sporting a bandana. And I thought, wow, he's moving into a different fashion realm here, because it was usually black shirts or jackets, and then he had the bandana for a while, and then the bandana came off, and I noticed there was a scar right here. It was about a 2-inch, 1.5-inch scar, and I immediately put 2 and 2 together, saying he must have had a neck injury. This is before I knew all of this.
Yeah.
Because usually when they go into your vertebrae in your neck, they go in from the front right here, because you would think they would be, it'd be easier going in from the back. But I guess to do any kind of disc type work, they have to go in through the front to separate them. And for those of you that want to see a cool video, or not cool, if you go on YouTube, you can see some of these types of surgeries.
Oof.
And they'll convince you you'll never want to do this, right? So I knew that he had some form of surgery on his neck. And this is certainly not the type of thing that now puts you in a position where you can do a cage fight, because all bets are off. There aren't many rules in a cage fight. In a boxing match, at least you have some basic rule, right?
Right.
Well, anyway, apparently Elon did now admit that he has had previous surgery between C5 and 6, and that they fused or put a plate instead of a disc in between that those two vertebrae. But apparently it's giving him problems again now, and he's saying that he's going to need an MRI before he can go into this cage fight to determine whether he needs surgery or not. Well, again, my advice would be, let's not do the cage fight, but if we must, I went to AI and I said, okay, guys, it looks like this cage fight is gonna happen. So I asked AI, and this is the prompt, come up with a batch of short slogans for the Musk-Zuckerberg cage fight, like the Thriller in Manila. And ChatGPT-4 did not disappoint. I got 14 variations of cool slogans for this new fight, this 21st century fight, and I'll read some of them to you. One of them is the Silicon Showdown. Another is the Bite Brawl of the Century.
Oh, and that's with BYTE, guys.
Exactly.
That's my favorite one so far.
But here's my favorite one. The Ultimate Geek Fight Night. Remember, these guys aren't athletes. They are not trained cage fighters. They have an IQ well beyond what a normal cage fighter has. I mean, do bright people really go into a ring with chain link all around, with no rules, and somebody has to emerge victorious, and you can get your brains bashed out, right? No, I mean, everything goes from kicking to, choking to you name it. Most people with a half a brain won't go for this type of thing, All right. Now, I'm probably saying rant stuff here, and you guys are probably going to create shorts from this, right? I can tell something's brewing here. So, my favorite was the Ultimate Geek Fight Night because these guys are highly intelligent business leaders. They are revered for not their physical prowess. We're not looking for Arnold Schwarzenegger bulging biceps underneath their t-shirt here. We're looking for their creative and critical thinking processes and what new things can they come up with that would help humanity. So having said all that, I'll read a few more. The Silicon Smackdown, a clash of the tech titans, Musk versus Zuckerberg Unleashed, and it goes on and on. So those of you that want to play with AI, see if you can come up with some of your own. But it looks like the cage fight may happen unless the prognosis from Elon's doctors are this may not be a good idea and you need to go back in for surgery.
I personally think the prognosis is they're going to continue to keep this in the press until such time as the internet consuming public starts to get tired of it, and then then Musk will come back and say that he can't do it because of the surgery.
Now let me ask you something. What indications would we have that the information age or the internet public is getting tired of this?
That's a good question. Because there's going to be a large contingent of people that will never get tired of stuff like this.
I mean, we already have enough trolls that are saying, oh, this is BS, this isn't real, So maybe that intensifies. But yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to watch for is, how will people, when will the indications, or when will the public finally have enough of this? And what will wake up these two guys and say, maybe it's not a bad.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at sports books, they'll go through and they'll do simulations on two sports teams to figure out the percentage that one team has of potentially winning a contest versus another team.
Yeah.
For example, the Arizona Cardinals, which are probably not going to be very good this year, they may simulate 1,000 seasons of the next coming NFL season in order to come up with, oh yes, the Cardinals have a 0.93% chance of being victorious. So how long before they have the AI simulators coming up with Musk versus Zuckerberg and the percentage chance of each one beating the other?
Now that would be a good thing to feed into AI. Yeah, might convince them to avoid this thing.
Maybe.
So, did we have the sumo picture up? Let's pop that up just one more time. And this allegedly is Elon Musk fighting a sumo wrestler. And a quote from Elon was, and I think I have that here.
Okay, it's up. I don't want to leave this on the screen for very long.
Okay, all right. We'll get rid of it here as fast as we can then. If I can find that quote from Elon. Apparently, this is a quote from Elon. He says, I managed to throw him, but it cost me smashing my C5 and C6 disc and 8 years of mega back pain, finally fixed with a C5 to C6 disc fusion. If you look at that guy on the left there, throwing him would take an enormous amount of strength and probably knock out anybody's back,
Sure.
But my hat's off to Elon for attempting it. What can I say?
He and Mark Zuckerberg are both that ultra competitive natured type of person. That's why they have the multi-billion-dollar companies that they have.
Yeah.
Let's let them continue moving their competitive juices in areas like that where they can help serve the public.
So we got some interesting comments here now. YouTube. All right, George says, in 1975, I was 3, LOL. Well, it sounds like you're a lot younger than me. In 75, I'd already graduated. Yeah. YouTube. Again, George, he says, I'd love a fight between Elon and Mary Barra.
Okay.
Now, there's a visual. Can you get that out of your head, do you think, from here on
I
out?
don't think I can. Niles has also said on YouTube, could the bandana have to do with Musk's hair implants?
Way too low, Niles. Yeah, way too low.
And then George comes back and says, we could set up a betting pool on our website for the cage fight.
That's not a bad idea.
Well, yeah, except we might run into some state of Arizona anti-gambling issues.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Instagram, Arash_ESMali72. He says, hello, good time. Well, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you.
And then George is back and says, that picture of the sumo just reminded me that I have to floss my teeth today.
All right, George.
Okay,
you do
George.
have an excellent sense of humor. You caught that finally, right?
Oh, jeez.
George, that was great. 10 out of 10, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
All right. Moving right along here.
Yeah.
On that note,
Yeah.
Well, there's one other thing that there was Motor Trend came out recently with a top 10 list.
Mhm.
The Motor Trend is known for this, and this year's top 10 list is the best 10 electric luxury vehicles. So without too much ado, let's go into that list. It was I was a little surprised. Some of the people on the list were not as luxury as I would have thought, but the top three I thought were kind of notable. Number 3 on the list was the Model 3. I think of it as it's a good, really solid vehicle. They like the driving, they like the range, they didn't really like the build quality, but they said overall it falls into the small or compact luxury sedan, and then Motor Trend said it was one of their overall their best small compact luxury vehicle, regardless of drivetrain type. Number 2 is the Model S, a larger full-size luxury vehicle. They love how it drives. They love awful lot about it. But their number 1 was the Lucid Air.
Really?
Yeah, they said, and I'm just going to read this from Motor Trend because I feel like it's very succinct, and they really pile on the love here.
Mm-hmm.
They said there's a new king of the EV luxury sedan hill in our Motor Trend Ultimate Rankings, the 2023 Lucid Air. It's a car conceived not by tech people, but rather by car people. It's gorgeous, naturally athletic, and massively spacious. Lucid offers a vehicle that can stand toe-to-toe with the Model S. Speaking of, we recently tested the highest performance spec Lucid Air Sapphire, Lucid's Plaid Fighter, and it is the quickest car we've ever tested in the quarter mile with a blistering 0 to 60 time of 2.2 seconds. The Air feels 2,000 pounds lighter than it is, with neutral handling and incredible acceleration. The interior is as beautiful as the exterior, with the expected array of tech features and more. The tech isn't foolproof, but it's hard to beat the Air for comfort. In many ways, the Air embodies EV luxury. It's brutally quick in performance, effortlessly cozy in comfort, and dramatically sleek in style.
Takes my breath away. This was the kind of an accolade that Tesla received many years ago for the Model S by Motor Trend.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the king has been replaced at this point in time.
It really does, and we've talked about in the past how with Peter Rawlinson at the helm, Lucid seems to have really taken efforts to become the anti-Tesla
Mhm.
in many ways, where Tesla is chaotic, where Tesla is kind of
Rambunctious
go with the flow,
and yeah.
seat of your pants, rambunctious. Lucid's very organized. I could see a Tesla office being just a complete chaos, messy type of office, but lots of stuff gets done. Lucid is going to be everything is neat, everything is in its place, everything is super organized, and they also get lots of stuff done. They've had what we've heard like from the likes of Sandy Munro, where he says the motors and the engineering that went into the motors on the Lucid vehicles is unlike anything he's ever seen before, and it's spectacular. Motor Trend tends to agree.
And what is amazing is the variation in stock prices between those two companies. I think that Lucid just hit another low of 631 or something like that this week.
Yeah, they, my take is, I will disclose, I'm an owner of some Lucid stock. So this is not intended as advice. It's my own personal opinion, regardless of whether I own stock or not. My take is that Lucid is undervalued, though.
Mm-hmm.
I realize that they have had their struggles. I still think that the company has the foundation and underpinning to truly be a great leader in the EV marketplace. And I think they have a chance at some point in the future of being able to rival Tesla in terms of just raw production output with better quality. And I think they're going to be one of the few rivals that may actually push Tesla to be better as a company than they are right now.
Well said. And of course, the concerns are fundamentally survival, and even that, based on who is funding the company, I'm not sure that that should even be a concern.
Yeah, I don't think it will. The Saudis have put a lot of money into Lucid. I know that they have been working with Lucid and kind of pushing them toward building another vehicle assembly plant in Saudi Arabia. The Lucid Air sedans are starting to be exported to Saudi Arabia as well, and they are hugely popular over there. So I see, I still see a good future for Lucid, in spite of the stock price, in spite of what you see.
I agree. Okay, YouTube. George is asking, have you guys worked on any non-Tesla brand EV vehicles in your shop there? Yes, George, when we first got started, we didn't have enough Teslas to work on, so we tackled any EV that would come along. We did the Ford Fusion, we did the Chevy Bolt and Volt, we did hybrids, the Toyota Prius. We used to replace batteries and repair those. So yes, we did, and thankfully we're very busy now with Tesla, where we don't have to work on those other brands anymore. You know, the problem is the support for EVs with these other brands that I mentioned is almost non-existent. And although we're very good at finding ways to get around that, we do reverse engineering. We have extraordinarily talented engineering people that can actually reverse these types of processes to give us the information we need on how to repair it. It's still daunting. It's not easy. And then, of course, trying to buy parts is a whole nother issue. So we're grateful and enjoying our Tesla relationship and our Tesla focus at this point in time. It doesn't mean that we're going to remain with Tesla forever, because other EV manufacturers are looking at us to help with their service delivery system.
Mm-hmm.
So that is also in our future. But at this point, yes, we've worked on a variety of other brands. What we try to stay away from is the fun projects, fun for me, which is an EV conversion. Take a 64 Mustang, for example, and electrify it. I'd love to be involved in stuff like that, but it doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
It is a money drain, and you can't really be profitable doing that at this point, at least. Eventually, we're going to have the equivalent of EV crate engines, where you have a plug-and-play method, and they're specifically designed and built for various platforms of cars, like a VW Bug, you know, the old 60s version. Doing an EV conversion for those, someone will eventually have an entire package that will give you everything you need to do the conversion, so you have fixed cost, and you can anticipate what your margin is. But for now, at least, we're just staying by the sidelines and watching that whole industry evolve.
Could you ever imagine if Lucid were to build a motor that were as large as the Tesla electric motor, and scaled because their motor is smaller with the same power, so you have more power and scale, and then you drop that Lucid motor into a Tesla Model S?
Wouldn't that be a social media event? Lucid powered Tesla.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We just gave a whole bunch of people an idea there. Rich, are you listening? This sounds like something right up your alley. Instead of putting a V8 into a Tesla, let's put a Lucid drivetrain in and see how the market recognizes or evaluates that change.
By all means. Niles has a comment for us on the Lucid, recent Lucid news, and says, at the current rate, Lucid has money left for 7 quarters. It's not good when their sales are down and inventories are up. Hope they survive.
You know, I think about that often, Niles, but let's remember the guys that are funding this effort are the same ones that are building a ski lodge in the middle of the desert. So, you know, And the other thing that I look at is continuously is their claim to fame is rapidly dying. This whole fossil fuel gig that has made them what they are. They realize that their future is going to be in embracing these technologies that are going to replace fossil fuel. So unless they're foolish, I don't think they're going to give up on Lucid.
Lucid's biggest strength is also one of their biggest weaknesses, in my opinion. They're beautifully engineered cars and they win all kinds of awards. Lucid is an engineering company right now at its leadership, not as much of a sales company as somebody like a Tesla. And the engineering company may be, it might be that they are getting stuck in that loop of looking for perfection when they could be just working at, let's get something that's excellent rather than perfect. I'm really, really interested to see what happens when the Gravity SUV comes out. Lucid has, I still think they've done a good job with their luxury vehicle. It's not meant for everybody. I think that once the Gravity SUV comes out, my understanding is it will be priced closer to the market that the other SUVs that are ICE-based are at.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'll have a much wider swath of potential market than the luxury sedan vehicle has.
That's a good point. In the last century, the auto manufacturers had a broad range of product that addressed various markets. You had your luxury cars, of course, and your upper-end cars, and then your middle of the road. But then you had cars that came out without carpeting. They had a vinyl floor mat on them.
Yeah.
The original Ford Mustangs had a very definite price point that had to be met, and it was $2,000 or under. I think $2,000. You used to be able to buy a car for $2,000, guys.
Yeah.
No frills, nothing fancy on the inside. Naugahyde seats. There was no leather in there or anything like that. No luxury. But you're right. I think that if Lucid were to use the existing momentum they have and their reputation and technology and begin to focus on a more scalable car, something that would appeal to the masses, that might be the ticket for a more rapid success for them.
I think it would be, and I'm hopeful that they will continue to go in that direction. My biggest hope and my biggest fear is that is with what they've got going with their new SUV that's due out around this time next year. When that Gravity SUV starts to roll off the lot, is it going to be the luxury SUV that's between $90,000 and $150,000, just kind of hitting the same market that their car is? I think that would be a mistake, frankly. If their base trim, like they're starting to advertise, may be in that 65 to 75,000 range, that's hitting that sweet mid to high end spot that they can't hit with their car right now, of people who are out there shopping for an SUV and saying, oh, I can get my gas guzzler that gets 16 miles to the gallon and gets me 350 miles of range, or I can get this electric vehicle that I can charge for a third the price or less and gets me the same 350 miles of range plus better acceleration and quieter ride and all that stuff. That's a much more compelling argument, or a much more compelling value proposition in my mind.
Sure. George is agreeing with Niles on that last comment. We hope they survive, definitely.
Yeah. On TikTok, JK Max says, hey guys, great Gruber service as always. Miranda emailed me 6 weeks ago about getting a quote for a refresh bumper in a 2014 Model S, but he had not gotten an estimate back yet. Is it a long process? I heard the refresh bumper is only a few hour process, so please let me know your thoughts.
I will check with the service team and see what's going on with that refresh bumper.
And then George on YouTube, have you guys seen or heard of an EV conversion that can charge at a Tesla supercharger? I have not heard of one yet.
What about Cyber Hooligan? Did he say in our interview if he can do the supercharging?
Well, he's starting with a Tesla Model 3, so he did say he can do supercharging, but that's because it's a Model 3 and not a non-Tesla.
Yeah, it's not really a conversion, is it? It's
No,
just
no, he's got the NACS connector on his car already.
yeah, okay.
Yeah. George, another comment from George. He says, and Lucid doesn't have a showman like Elon. Good point. Or a showman like Pete for Gruber Motors.
You know, Pete Rawlinson is an engineer. You've seen him there with his whiteboard, and go through the the technology that's inside the cars, and it's difficult for an engineer to muster up the personality necessary to be a showman. And yeah, not everyone is blessed with that. But you know, the future that I see for Lucid is that the current staff that is there now is not the staff that will be there forever. There will be many other people that will be involved. One of the names that comes to mind actually at Lucid is Zach Edson. He used to be a Tesla employee. He is, I believe, their national sales manager at this point. And it will be people like that that will eventually emerge in the limelight. We'll still have our engineers doing the whiteboard stuff.
Right. It's kind of like when Tim Cook took over Apple from Steve Jobs. Steve was a larger-than-life personality. Tim Cook took over, and he had these impossibly big shoes to fill. And he didn't try to be Steve Jobs. He just tried to be who he was, and he let the marketing people put things out for the marketing, and then he went and did his job. When Steve Jobs was there, Apple was big. They were valued at $150 billion or something like that. Now with Tim Cook, they're valued at $3 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Lucid's going to have that type of moment where Peter Rawlinson may still be the CEO. You may have the same CFO. You may have the same senior management. Somebody with that personality become the face of the organization.
Sure.
I could see that step up, but I'm not saying that they don't have that person yet, but they may or they may not.
We have an Instagram question, D's.stow, who's referring to the Plaid, I believe. He says, how easy is it to do a power upgrade such as the over-the-air update did? Is it as simple as an ECU tune? If it's related to the Plaid upgrade, yeah, usually these are software limitations, and what usually happens is hackers eventually figure out where how to get behind the paywall, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
There is, of course, more to this upgrade than just simply the software unleashing. And, Tesla does seem to be a good option for this at this point. We're starting to get the wrap-up signs from the social media guys here. We're at an hour and a half. We quickly run through some questions. Richard Flentke, thank you, Richard. He says, Pete is the Tom Cruise of the EV world. It must be the sunglasses, but thank you, Richard. Nice compliment. George is saying, yes, Richard Flentke. And then what does that make Mark if Mr. Pete is Tom Cruise?
I'm Goose.
Goose, there
No,
you go.
have you ever watched Top Gun?
I did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one movie I watched, but the original one, not the updated version. And then, of course, we've been called Tick and Tack, the Tappet brothers. And,
yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
that's another updated version of what we do, apparently. Watch Rich Rebuilds again, George. Oh, no, Jesse is going to chime in and say the show's over in an hour and a half. He did that. He did that very thing, George.
Yeah, we got to wrap it up.
And he does this. You get the motions, and let's go. YouTube, Johnny Cruz. All right. Tom's brother. Can I turn a Model 60 into an 85 battery upgrade with Gruber, and what is the cost? Yes, you can go from a 60 to an 85. There is some programming changes that need to be made. And off the top of my head, I can't give you a cost. It also depends on the battery, the replacement battery. Is it going to be something you buy on eBay? Is it something that we procure? Is it a brand new? Well, no, of course, the 85 would not be brand new because of 90s. But yeah, the cost could be quoted. If any of you are interested in doing business with Gruber Motors, ev@gruber.com for those kinds of questions.
One more Niles comment. This was to George. He said, I have no idea, but if Pete was Waldorf, Mark might be Statler.
Okay, right.
Yeah. So, well, thank you guys so much again for joining us today. It's a true joy to be able to have the privilege of participating and being on the show here. So we appreciate all you guys do. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the Tesla Roadster Roundtable, same time, 10 a.m. Pacific Daylight or Mountain Standard Time. And then Thursday, we've got this show again at 10 o'clock as well.
And I agree. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you on the next show then.
Take care.